The Principal Secretary in the State Department of Housing and Urban Development is with us this morning. Charles Hinga, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's been a minute since we had a conversation.
It has.
And housing, affordable housing is a buzzword that everybody is now, it has become a buzzword, a buzz phrase that we're all, looking at, talking about. We'll get into that conversation this morning. Karibu sana to the Situation Room's hot seat. Before we get into it, problem from Eritrea is what CT wants to share this morning.
Yes. When you throw a stone at God, it comes right back on top of your head. That's an Eritrean proverb.
Okay.
You stop looking at me as though I made it up. It's the Eritreans who made up this proverb, not me.
I'm going to say your middle name's Eritrea, no.
When you throw a stone?
When you throw a stone at God, it comes right back on top of your head. Now that's one stone. Now imagine if you threw more than one stone, what happens?
You get affordable housing.
See, now I was going to ask him what he thought about the proverb, but he's just gone ahead and told us, you throw a few more stones, you get affordable housing. I mean, a stone or two is going to put a house together, isn't it? So do I still need to ask you what you think about the proverb?
Well, I think I have said what I had to say. Right?
I didn't see that one coming.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
So maybe affordable housing is a little bit more than a three or two stones together, isn't it, Pierce?
Absolutely. And it's more than four walls and a roof.
Right. It's front and center of the conversation today. It's also married with the conversation about, so you're going to make us give you 3% of our earnings, doesn't matter what it is. In order for you to make this affordable housing a reality, you're going to come back to us and ask us to do it. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. When you talk about affordable housing, what on earth are we talking about?
And thank you so much again for having me. I think the last time we had this conversation was during COVID time. And so it was virtual.
Yes.
So it's good at least to see you in person.
Indeed.
I think a lot of people today are asking themselves, why are we still talking about affordable housing? When you look at the Jubilee government, housing was front and center of the manifesto. And when you look at the Kenya Kwanza government agenda, in fact, if you look at our president, his DNA is just housing. And sometimes we ask ourselves, why housing? Why is it such a topical issue today? And yet Kenyans, it's not like they're sleeping in the open. And I think it's a fair question. But for us, in order to be able to answer that question, we need to look back and see what is actually our housing market today. And the word that you can use is broken. We have a broken system. And how is it broken, and what are the results that show that it is broken? First of all, over 65% of Kenyans that are living in our urban areas today, they live in slums. You know that as part of my docket, I look after informal settlements. In 2019, when is the last time we did a census of our informal settlements, we had 1,141 informal settlements across the country. 1,141. And you ask yourself, why are we having all these informal settlements? And before I answer that question, then we come to 2017, when our partners at the World Bank conducted a very extensive study. And I'd really like us to, it is available for free. Just download it. It is called Unavailable and Unaffordable. And they did a very serious diagnostics of our housing market in Kenya. And some of the statistics that shows why we are where we are shocking, because at the time, an average cost of a house in Nairobi was 11 million. 11 million. Now, I'm going to use a lot of figures today, and I hope I don't lose you and I don't lose the listeners, but I think it is important for context. If the average house is 11 million, using the current market rates for a mortgage, and the banks are not lending more than 10% outside the KMRC. Forget about the KMRC because that's a part of our intervention. So they give you, if you're lucky, you get 10 years. And it is market-based interest rate. Today, the interest rate is, because the cap is over, it is over 17%. Some people are even seeing their mortgages at 20%. But let's use a conservative figure of 14%. If you have an 11 million house for 10 years at 14%, your monthly repayments is 153,000 shillings a month. Okay? And data doesn't lie. Now, put that figure at the back of your mind, because if you look at our household income data, 75% of all, pay slip carrying Kenyans earn less than 50,000 shillings.
Net?
That's their gross. 50,000.
Repeat that again.
75% of all pay slip carrying, that is, they have a formal job.
Yes.
Okay? They earn less than 50,000 shillings. Okay? 97% of all former Kenyans who are carrying a pay slip again earn less than 150,000. So if an average unit is 11 million at 10 for 10 years at 14%, it means less than actually 3% of the entire market can actually afford. So if you take that and extrapolate it further, 92% of all people who live in Nairobi, they rent. And we've had this debate: do they rent because they like renting, or they rent because they can't afford?
Can't afford to own.
So I think these are all fair conversations. Then coupled with that is you look at certain things that make our housing market. For one of them is land. It's one of the biggest factors of production in terms of housing. Land in Nairobi now is the most expensive in the continent. That the study has shown us recently. If you look at other markets, the cost of land vis-a-vis the entire cost of the development, in other markets it's somewhere between 10 and 15%. Ours is somewhere between 30 and 50%, depending on where you're buying.
Okay, so the cost of land, sorry, PS, the cost of land in relation to the
overall
development
Correct.
of a particular project.
Correct.
All right.
It's somewhere between 30 and 50%.
Okay.
And we use, say, 40% as an average. So then, therefore, the question that we all have is, how do you need an intervention? Because I've been reading a lot of, on social media, why is government intervening? The market can do that. The question is, if left alone, the market, which is definitely chasing a return, okay, will continue producing for the 2%. And our slums will continue growing. And a few years from now, we're going to look at, this country, and we're going to say, how did we get here? And so we've got to do something. Now, and I'm still going to get to the mechanics of how we want to do it. The other thing that you need to put into consideration is that the Kenyans themselves, okay, in our long-term national strategy, they chose and they said that by the year 2030, we want to have a high quality of life. That is something that they said we want. So how do you get a high quality of life when 65% of your people live in informal settlements and others live in what we call tenements? In Huruma, we go to Pipeline, they have no playing field, you have no water, you have no sewer services, but there is a house, there's a structure. So how do you have a high quality of life if that is what the market is producing? So that's a fair question. So they said, no, let us do something about it. And then lastly, when we bequeathed ourselves with the new constitution, there were certain rights which they are unqualifiable rights. They are non-negotiable rights. Okay? These are social justice rights, which are contained in Article 43 of our constitution. And in that part, the Kenyans said that every Kenyan, not some Kenyans, have a right to housing. And not just housing, but it has to be affordable, it has to be decent, and it must have adequate services. That is a right. And therefore, now that brings me to the most topical issue. You know, you can bequeath yourself as many rights as you want.
Yeah.
And that is fair, right? The question is how do you fund those rights?
With a right that is bequeathed upon yourself as a citizen, or saying that as vanguards of the same citizens, who is responsible then for providing either the environment within which those rights then can be lived out, or then bears the responsibility to provide, in this case, the money to make those rights then, again, lived out.
And that is why the biggest public participation that Kenyans do happens every 5 years. Because every 5 years, our politicians go out there and sell their manifesto. Because part of the manifesto is to tell you how are they going to fulfill your rights and how are they going to use your money. And so they come up with manifestos. And the interesting part of this conversation is that if you look at the two main protagonists in the 2022 general election, housing was front and center of their manifesto.
Yes.
Okay? Meaning that whichever formation was going to win, housing was going to be a topical issue. So the question still lies, okay, how are you going to finance? Now, it's an important question because while they are selling the manifesto to you, they also have a responsibility of telling you how will they provide those rights. Because you see, the problem is that, you know, they can come and promise you everything. They can promise you everything that they want to promise you when they are looking for your vote.
Sure.
I think our biggest mistakes as Kenyans is that we have actually never gotten to a point where we say, can you cost your manifesto? You see, if you look at the US, for example, and they do the same thing. They promise we're going to do this, we're going to do that, education, but their manifesto is costed. So that they tell you we're going to borrow so much, we're going to tax you X. So the challenge with our system is that we get all carried away by the slogans and the excitement of being on top of cars and all those things. And we forget to ask the pertinent question, is how will you fund?
Okay, so let's ask you, Bwana Hinga, because you're a structural man. We've had conversations with you about the BRT. We've had conversations about decongesting the city in terms of traffic. You were not put in this position because, you know, somebody licked their finger and put it in and saw which way the wind was blowing on a particular day. There's a reason why you were put there.
Right.
So there's some expertise that you have. We've seen things that you've written, work in the southern part of the continent. You were picked for a reason. So you tell us then, how should these things be costed? Because these numbers that you're giving us this morning are staggering. That only 2% of the country's working population, even if they weren't working, are able to afford their own homes.
Yes.
And we're not saying buy it cash. And even this affordability we're talking about is paying on a monthly basis, right? We're talking about 92% of the people who live within any urban area are renting.
Yes.
Are not able to buy. So if somebody comes and stands on top of a vehicle, as you say, and say, well, we're going to make a housing affordable for everybody, from the position in which you sit in today, as the man who runs housing and urban development, how is it supposed to work? Who's supposed to fund
That's a very, very fair question. And let me answer it this way first. It's important for our dear Kenyans to know that government has got no money of its own. Government has largely two sources of money. It has tax, and where there's a shortfall, it borrows money. Those are the only two avenues that government. So whatever promises you got, if you were to cost them, it's either going to increase your taxes or it's going to increase your levels of borrowing. And that's the plain truth. Number 3, the only alternative to that is what we call PPP, private-public partnership. And that is how we want to deliver this housing, through public-private partnership. And in itself, it has got its own limitations. Okay? And what are those limitations? Essentially, what we are saying is that we get an investor and we tell that investor, build these houses for these prices because this is what we believe Kenyans can afford. Okay? And government is going to do X, you do Y, and then Kenyans will do Z. So what is that? Okay? Government says, I will provide you with the land at no cost. So you're not buying the land. So if you go back to the original figures that I provided, we slash off, say, 40% of the total cost of the development when government provides land at no cost. Because the expectation is that you will have to cap the selling price. Because otherwise, if you don't cap the selling price, these investors will take that and will convert it into some more shillings in their bank account. So you provide land and you ensure that the value of that land goes to the actual buyers. That's number one. Number two, you must service that land. Servicing the land means you must be able to put trunk infrastructure so that you are able to achieve the decent and adequate housing. Because if you don't do water, if you don't do sewer, if you don't do electricity, if you don't do internet, which has become a utility, okay, those houses are not meeting the threshold for adequate housing with basic services. All right? Now, that part alone of the horizontal infrastructure accounts for another 15% of the total cost. Then government says, in addition to that, because I'm the one who is in charge of taxes, I am not going to tax you, Mr. Developer. With the cement you're going to use to build those houses, don't pay VAT. The steel, no VAT. Whatever you import, no VAT. Why? Because VAT in our sector is a real cost.
Yes.
That's add to another 10%. I hope you're adding up these figures because I will demonstrate to you how those interventions have actually translated into what numbers.
Right.
So 40% is off, 15% is off, then you have another 10% through the taxes. You're at 65. Now, the 11 million average house that you were building in 2017 today has gone down to 3 million. Okay? Because of just government intervention. And no, government is not, and I think people confuse and they think that government is building the houses. No. Government is intervening because you have a broken system. And when you have a broken system, you can't massage your way out of it. You know, you must take hard knocks. Okay? So we say, let's forgo these taxes. All right? When we are taxing more, but you say for this particular case, we are forgoing the taxes. Why? Because there is no way an average Kenyan can own a home when it is at 11 million. So we start with the answer or what is the known and we calculate back to the unknown. When we did our calculations, now based on the figures I gave you, if 50% of average Kenyans and 75% of average Kenyans of Kenyans earn 50,000 and below, you ask yourself, someone who is carrying a payslip of 50,000, what kind of a home can they afford? You start looking at 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million. Someone earning 100,000, what can they be able to afford? Up to 150,000, which is 97% of the people who, by the way, those people, even if they were to walk into a bank and apply for a mortgage, some of them may qualify, but then they have to pay almost their entire salary. Yeah. And in fact, there's a part of the law that says you can't deduct someone more than a third. 2/3. So a third must stay. Okay? So I hope that is now starting to put a bit of context of the challenge that we have and how we are solving it. So even if government has brought down those costs, because we have brought down those costs. If you go to Park Road, a 3-bedroom, 60 square meter unit is going for 3 million. A 2-bedroom, 40 square meter is going for 2 million.
And we're saying that this is now possible because of these hard knock interventions that government has taken to make it happen.
Okay. Now, the 3 million unit in Park Road, same size, outside Park Road, in the same vicinity, is going for 7.6 million. So today, if we were to allow people to sell those houses, they'll sell them for 7.65 million. Okay? So therefore, the subsidies that government has already provided into that program has ensured, okay, that value has been passed on to an average Kenyan.
CT has many questions.
Not really. What Dr. Hinga has explained makes perfect sense. Because if you are asking about, we talk about cost of production. Now, if you talk about the cost of housing, and you understand the role that the government plays, one, in terms of the value and the cost of land, how that contributes to the eventual cost of the house, and then you look at the government business when it comes to levying taxes and just doing what government does in order to raise revenue. Now, the moment you remove that, it doesn't require too much thinking. That cost will automatically go down. But there's this small matter. When it's a PPP, you're dealing with a private entity whose key mandate usually is to make a little profit. So does that mean that we will cap the profit? Meaning there's a limit to how much profit you can actually make?
Absolutely. Yes. And before we went on the break, because I need to land. It's important that I land because
always a good thing, yeah.
It's always good to land because sometimes I landed the hard way because in 2018,
yes,
now Hussein, who's in government at Citizen,
yes,
took me to the cleaners because I didn't land, and I was known as the lottery man because it was left hanging. So allow me to land.
Please land.
So I still want to let's use the 3 million, which is the higher side of now the affordable housing program, so that we introduce now the housing fund. So government has done all the interventions we have done, from the cost of land to the horizontal infra to taxes, and it's not just VAT. If you're a first-time homeowner, there is no stamp duties. You get a 300,000 a year mortgage relief once you start repaying. When you're saving towards a home, you get an affordable housing relief. There is so many taxes. As a matter of fact, any import that comes in, the cost of import declaration duty is lower for affordable housing. The railway development levy is lower for affordable housing. There is so much the government has done so that we can get to the answer. So we started with the answer and then went back to the unknown. How do you get there?
Right.
Now we've gotten to the answer. Today we have a 3 million unit house. Now let's get to the financing side. Because even if you build that 3 million, is how much will it cost per month?
Yes.
For someone to afford it?
Yes.
Now, I think we've done exemplary well to move it from 11 to 3. But here are some raw statistics. Again, if we leave it to the market. Now I've left 11. Remember 11 million, the repayments were 153,000 a month. Now, 3 million at the same market rate of 10 years, 14%. It is 47,000.
Per month.
Okay? 47,000.
Over what period of time?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Because that's what the market is giving you. Okay? So, then you ask yourself, why is government getting involved in the financing aspect of it? It is simply because at 47,000 a month, again, very few Kenyans will afford.
Yes.
So, what did we determine? We said, someone who is earning 50,000, can they be able to pay 15,000 shillings? Can they be able to pay 15,000? Can they be able to pay 10,000? Can they be able to pay 5,000? Okay, because that's what they are paying for those shacks.
Yes.
And that's what they're paying for those tenements. So you're saying, can I put you in the same position that you are in today so that it's not costing you more? But now I can put you in a decent house that you will own. Okay? So to do that, how do you move 47 to 15? You have to alter the financing aspect of it. Okay? And how do you alter? You have to mess up with two you have to mess up with two items.
You have to rejig two
You have to rejig
items.
the interest rate. Okay? Now, to move from 14% to almost half of it, and if possible, at 5%. Okay? I, as a principal secretary, I am a beneficiary of a government-enabled mortgage at 5%.
Now, what sorcery is this? Because how does that happen?
Because it is an entitlement under the government scheme. But majority of Kenyans, and that's what the president was asking the other day, was saying, the MPs enjoy that. The judiciary, they enjoy that. They all enjoy employer-backed schemes. But at how much? At 5%.
5%.
So if I was to, and 5% is not a thumbsuck. Okay, it's not some number we say picky, picky, ponky, right? The 5% is a number that allows you, with your salary, to be able now to pay for that mortgage. Number two, you have got to rejig the tenure. So 10 years doesn't work. Okay? So we have then, so I'm coming from the answer now to the question.
Yeah.
Right? So the answer is that I need a solution for Kenyans to own this home, that we have now brought down the cost from 11 to 3 million. I need to give them interest rate of 5.
Yes.
I need to give them a tenure that is longer than 10. How do you do that? If I go to the banks, they'll tell you to get lost.
Yes, of course.
Okay? Because they're telling you, why must I invest in 5% when I can do nothing and just go and take treasury bonds and I get 14%? I am not a, this is people's money. And people are investing their money with us, right? So there is no way the bank can provide a mortgage at 5%.
It's not in their business
It's
to do
not
it.
in their business.
Yeah.
Okay? The banks have, and I don't want to get very technical, but they have rules, Basel rules and all those things of how much they can hold a certain asset class. And so for them to give you 10 years, it's not because they don't want to give you more, but it's because of the risk-weighted, what CBK has imposed and how long they can hold that asset. Okay? Because remember, and like I said, I don't want to get very technical. For every mortgage they give, they must park some money with the bank, with central bank. Okay. So, so the banks are not necessarily the solution to that. Who is the solution? It has to be government, and that what brings us to the housing fund. Because then we are saying, if you build those houses, if you ask the investor, I have given you the land, and I'm going to give you an example. If I give you the land, I give you all these promises. Please build these houses. Will the Kenyans buy those houses? They will want to buy, but the investor is going to say, these guys can't afford it.
Yes.
So about 2 months ago, we advertised 50 parcels. It was in the papers. It was in your paper here. 50 parcels of land. These parcels of land, we are offering them to investors to build houses at no cost to them. So you're not asking them to buy. Unfortunately, these parcels of land were largely in the western side of Kenya. Right? So we had a lot of parcels in Kisii, in Nyamira. We had Kehancha in Migori. We had Homa Bay. We had Bungoma. Out of 50 parcels, only 2 parcels were taken.
Why?
Because the investor who is sitting there is looking and saying, there's no way I'm investing my money in Kehancha or Karachuonyo. I'm not. But if you give me land in Nairobi, when we gave them land in Nairobi, there was a queue.
It was oversubscribed.
Over 23 of them in the queue fighting for that piece of land. Okay? Those are realities. So essentially, even if you have provided all these things as government, again, if you leave it to the market, they look and they say, I'm not going to Maral in Samburu. No, but we know there are Kenyans in Samburu.
Yeah.
And we know the Kenyans in Samburu want housing. Okay? And the constitution didn't say some Kenyans. It says all Kenyans.
Right.
So therefore, we determined that in order for us to be able now to provide those houses at those prices, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, we have got to do something that every Kenyan knows how to do.
And that is?
A national chama. It's like a national circle. Right? Because
Dr. Hinga,
listen to me.
you're saying essentially this thing which is a tax, not a tax,
It's
a
not a
fund,
tax.
not a okay, it's not a tax, a fund, not a fund. Now what we're saying is that it's everybody coming together in a society to put funds together so that everybody can have a house.
Correct. It's a chama. And just like any other chama, you have rules. Right? In this case, we are saying contribute 3% of your salary, but we cap it We've capped it. The highest earning person will only pay 2,500. So me as Hinga, I'll only pay 2,500.
Every month.
Every month. 2,500 in 7 years, because context is important, is 210,000. So in other words, if I was to tell Hinga, you have the option, pay 210,000 today, you put it in the fund and forget about it, okay? Or I deduct it over a period of time. But it's only 210. Majority of Kenyans will pay 1,000 shillings. 1,000 into the fund. That is 84,000 in 7 years. So even when we talk about when there is an uproar about the housing fund and the numbers, it's not like we're bankrupting Kenyans. But why is this figure important? You know, this figure is important because when we changa together into this, it's a saving. We're saving together into this scheme, right? I can now go to the same investors that looked at me when I told them, take this land in Kehanja, in Mararal, in Karachuonyo, and they basically told me to get lost. I can still go back to them and tell them, now, build those houses. Okay, I've given you the land, I've given you the taxes, I've given you the infrastructure. Now, I give them something which is called an offtake guarantee. Why? Because we are changaing money. And the collective, your 2,500, your 2,500, my 2,500, the 1,000 for Wanjiko is going to give us, plus the voluntary is going to give us 9 billion a month.
Assuming that how many people are onto this fund?
No, but remember, we have statistics. We have 3 million plus Kenyans who are formally employed. Okay? The employer is contributing and you're contributing. When you work out those numbers at 100%, plus a small portion, conservative portion of voluntary, because the people who are in the informal, the Juakali and those guys, will also contribute. Our estimate is 9 billion a month.
Okay.
Now, with 9 billion a month, I can start projects in every corner of this country without consideration as to what the investor is saying. Because I'll tell the investor, you build, use your money to build, okay? Hand over the keys to me. In exchange of keys, I give you the money and you go. And you don't have to worry about a Samburu girl, Sijui, a Masai, whatever, Sijui, a Kisi from, you know. You don't have to worry about those guys, right? Because we know out of this fund, because we're not borrowing, it is a saving, right? We're saving together. Now I can be able to give you, interest rate at 5%. I can give you 30 years to pay.
But people have contributed for you to build the house.
Yes.
So, but they're still going to come and take a mortgage on that house?
Exactly.
Please explain how this
So let me explain.
work. Because I think that's where the uproar is from.
I know. And then I know some...
Yeah, because folks are saying, wait a minute.
Gabriel, what is his name?
You guys have gotten this 9 billion and you're getting this 9 billion from us every month. We've been told that Kenyans will be able to come back and get it later. But then if I want to own a house, I still have to come and get a mortgage. But I've contributed to the scheme in the first place.
But you see,
what are the mechanics of it?
If you pay 1,000, there is no way 1,000 can get you to even for rent. Okay? But the 1,000 has enabled us to build the houses en masse.
Okay.
Okay? Because the investor, we are exiting the investor. Okay? When they finish, they give us the keys, we pay them, they go. Right? Then you, Kenyan, who is in Mararal, now you enter into that house. And we enter now into a contract. Now you switch. You switch from paying rent where you're paying 5,000. And I tell you, continue paying the same 5,000 into this scheme. Okay? For 30 years, the house is yours. Some of them have paid 30 years rent and they've died and they have nothing to bequeath, whatever. A lot of people, they retire. The biggest expense in retirement is rent. So you're saying, please start now, okay? Pay the 1,000. The 1,000 is pooling of money. It's like pension. You know how pension works? I'm 30 years and I'm contributing to pension, but my money is used to exit someone who is at 60.
Yes.
Okay? It's pooling of money. It's insurance. You pay insurance. Behind it, they're very complicated mechanics. But you pay a premium, all right? But if you get an accident, they pay you for the full amount.
Sure.
Okay? But your premium is not equivalent to okay? It is the principle of pooling of money. So when we pool money, together, all right, people will start owning houses at different stages, at different points.
Terry, there's something I want to ask you. The vast majority of the people who live in this country are not in formal employment.
Correct.
Now, what plan do you have to accommodate such people? Because they are all involved in some grouping or the other,
Yes.
some SACCO or the other.
Correct.
And some SACCOs even have a housing component
Correct.
where people contribute to it. Some have a component for buying plots.
Yes.
How is the government tapping into this? Because these are already organized groups. Their thinking is clear.
Correct.
And they fall into the category of these rent-paying Kenyans.
Correct.
Who, in many instances, would very dearly want to own a house.
Now, that's a very fair question. So let me put it this way. I was born in an informal settlement in Nakuru. I was born in Bondeni. I lived in Kwaronda.
You grew up in Nakuru?
I grew up in Nakuru.
As did I.
So you see, we are mates now, right? So I was born in Nakuru in an informal settlement.
Yes.
My dad was a civil servant, he's late now, who was earning 6,000 shillings. Okay? My dad joined a SACCO, and we went and bought land in Bahati, part of Nakuru.
Yeah, I know about
That the scheme was called Guatanero.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
remember, it was a land buying company.
It was a land buying company.
The other one was called Defo.
Therefore, yes. So now I can see we can talk about our stories. Okay. So, and I want to use the story of my dad because it is a story of many Kenyans that have gone the SACCO way. So SACCOs, by the way, I must commend them. They have done more than even the other financial institutions in terms of our mortgages from banks are less than 30,000.
Yes.
But for SACCOs, they're almost 100,000. But what is the SACCO model? So my dad joined this scheme. He saved a little bit of money. They bought land collectively. Okay? You repay the loan that you took from the SACCO. And then you borrow some more money now to start building your house. Okay? You know, 9 years later, my dad passed away without ever completing that house. Okay? That is the story of many Kenyans. Because it takes you average 7 to 9 years through the SACCO model. But it is doing something, but it is too long. In our scheme, we are saying, let us bring the money together. Government provides you with the land. So you remember the first part is you save to buy the land. I'm saying you don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to do that anymore because I am giving you land
Go
for free.
straight to building the house.
Exactly. And I'm saying don't borrow the money yourself to build the house. I will tell the investor to build those houses. And they'll build them in 2 years. In 2 years' time, you'll be in your house. Not 9, if you're lucky. That is the difference. That is only happening because you have given us the ammunition. And this ammunition that we're talking about, this collective saving that we are talking about, all right,
Is your 3%.
is your 3% capped at 2,500. So I'm saying I'm not bankrupting you today, but your 2,500 is so important because collectively we're able to. Now, your second question, the Juakali guy.
All of them are in some SACCOs.
18 million to 20 million of Kenyans are informally employed.
Yes, they are.
And in fact, we believe that those who are informally employed will actually, once the fund gets going and the noise has died, and you see, there is another issue, which is a trust issue. You see, people don't trust us. They don't trust government because in the past we've done so many manga things, right? So when they see a housing fund, they see this is another scheme.
Another route for you to steal
route
even
to
that
steal.
2,500 shillings.
Exactly.
You're going to steal it.
So,
Yeah.
so we must earn the trust of the Kenyans, okay? And we are going to earn the trust of Kenyans through this program, all right? So when an ordinary, like when you go to Park Road, I have 55 Juakali artisans that are homeowners.
To own units.
I have 8 Matatu stage workers. And stage workers are not owners. Stage workers are touts
They are my numbers.
and drivers. 8 of them are homeowners. I have a woman who came to my office and she sells eggs. And she converted the trays of eggs into a house. That's the face of Kenya. Why? Because we were able to finance them. We were not able to do 5, we financed them at 7. We were not able to do 30, we financed them at 25 years. But without the housing fund, I can only do 1 project, 2 projects. But with the housing fund, I can start a project in every part of the country as we speak right now. And I'm so advanced. You see those parcels that were, the people left, they refused to take them, plus others. I have 569 parcels of land today that I can release in every part of this country. But there is one last part that if you forget about everything that I have said, I really want you to understand. Why housing? Why has housing been center forward? Because remember, we've said it's not that Kenyans are living on top of trees or Kenyans are sleeping in the open air. Okay? So there is what I have dealt with is the aspect of decency, adequate, affordable, and even ownership. Okay? Because people are saying, why are you talking about ownership? Okay? Why my domestic worker doesn't have to own a home? Why?
And the question is, why not? Why shouldn't?
Why not? But we are also saying, let's talk about affordable rental. But before I get distracted and talk about that, let me put it this way. People are asking, why housing? Why did Jubilee government talk about housing? Why is Kenya Kwanza government talking about housing? Why did Azimio have housing as front and center of their manifesto? It is because, and this is something people keep on missing, that the existential risk in this country today is unemployment. It is unemployment. The youth bulge. People leaving universities and TIs and all these TVET colleges, and they cannot get a job.
And this essentially will solve it. We can't unpack all of this today, but one thing I would urge is a comeback on this.
I can come back tomorrow, I'll come back Saturday.
Because the way to understand it and to maybe get rid of some of the politics is for explainers like this to happen.
Exactly. And allow me just to finish that part, one part, and I'm going to be very quick. So, if you disaggregate a house into components and you build them at scale. So let me give you some interesting numbers. If you build 200,000 homes at scale, that is 18 million bags of cement. Do we produce cement in Kenya?
Yes.
We do. The problem today is because we are not building at scale, even those plants are not operating at optimal.
Yes, they are not.
So we have so many cement. Now, to move the cement from the factory, there's people who's working. There's a truck driver. There's someone who's working on site. So jobs created. But take it from cement to sockets. How many sockets are in a house? Do you know we import hinges in this country? We import hinges. How many hinges are in a door?
And so many of those things can happen even as we speak.
Every piece of that is an industry. So when you talk about manufacturing, manufacturing cannot just happen from nowhere. We must create what is called consumptive demand.